Hello and welcome to this month's episode of Ziva Talks. Today I'm delighted to be joined by my friend and former classmate Elizabeth O'Hagan, who's a community pharmacist with a passion for integrative health and lifestyle, to explore the topic of the anti-inflammatory diet. We'll briefly touch on some of the key food groups and some of the anti-inflammatory properties and medicinal benefits of the foods we discuss, as well as touching on some simple ways we can begin to make some small changes that can make big differences to how we feel and function in the long run.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's my first podcast, so this is quite cool. No, but it is great to be able to discuss something I'm passionate about and to try share some information and hopefully simplify something that can be quite overwhelming. We hear what we should eat, what we shouldn't eat, and it can be quite confusing sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I see it with customers coming into the pharmacy all the time that, the do's and don'ts. But what people forget is food can be seen as medicine. It should be enjoyed.
Absolutely.
We're very lucky to live in a world where we have so many options around us for food. And yeah, just to explore the health benefits and how it can really impact your well-being.
Yeah, I love that, Liz, because I think that we're very much moving away from an old mindset around food, eating just to avoid illness. And I think that creates a lot of tension for people because they feel a bit fearful. Are they eating the right thing or the wrong thing? We're starting to steer focus more and more towards eating in order to thrive and feel better. And that real exploratory and kind of curious mindset or approach that you've just mentioned. So rather than trying to fixate on finding what's the right thing or the right way, but really experimenting and exploring what helps you as an individual to feel better in conjunction with following kind of proven or, you know, general principles or guidelines that are out there that have been shown to be beneficial for people.
Yeah, exactly. And the anti-inflammatory diet has been proven. As we know, we've studied it. Um, and yeah, let's just share what we know.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and yeah, it won't be too heavy. Keep it nice and simple. But hopefully by the end of the show, people will feel like they might have a couple of new ideas to take forward, take away from it, and implement small, simple lifestyle changes that will be sustainable.
Sustainable,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so to start, for any listeners maybe who aren't familiar with the anti-inflammatory food pyramid, it's largely based on many of the national healthy eating guidelines you'd be familiar with. So the usual culprits, high in whole foods, so our fruit and veg making up a large portion of what we consume, and healthy whole grains. Where it begins to differ is it leans much more towards the Mediterranean diet and thereby includes a lot of olive oil and healthy oils, as well as elements of the Asian food pyramid. And this is where people maybe are less familiar with certain foods, especially various herbs and spices that have been proven to have a very anti inflammatory effect on the body and support the body going back into homeostasis,
Hmm.
finding balance. So I sometimes use the comparison where added sugars, saturated fats, and salts are like the proverbial poker stoking at the fire, causing that strain and inflammation burn up in the body. That the anti inflammatory diet is full of foods that actually have that counter effect, that
Hmm.
have that dampening effect and really support us finding balance again.
And the Asian foods, like traditional Chinese medicine, you know, they're so medicinal and they've been used for thousands and thousands of years. And they're readily available too. So
And
it's
cheap.
cheap. Yeah, it's just to know where to go, what to
Yeah,
what to use in what recipe, even like how to use them.
build confidence.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
actually, there was a blog published last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we have a Healing Herbs and Spices blog that was published recently on the Zibo.
Oh, I must check that out.
Yeah, yeah.
And so should the listener.
Get in there. And I just note at this point that Liz is on our way back from a weekend surfing in Clare. So,
Yeah, it's
just for context. So this is wonderful that you're here today. So you mentioned about the Chinese elements of the Asian food pyramid, and a lot of the components, apart from the herbs and spices, would be the feature of medicinal mushrooms, such as chaga mushrooms, maitake, cordyceps. There's many different forms of these Asian mushrooms that have a very interesting nutritive profile, and I know will be coming to the fore more and more
Mhm.
in years to come, because again of this powerful anti-inflammatory, antioxidative, and harmonizing effect that they can have.
Yeah, the mushrooms are really interesting because when we were studying our course, um, what really struck me was when you think about where a mushroom grows and how it survives in really difficult conditions, like it might not have access to sunlight. It's usually around trees which have roots taking up most of the nutrients from the soil, yet the mushroom still survives and thrives and grows. So, in order for it to survive, it has built up this innate armor and is full of phytonutrients, which has like they've been proven to be so beneficial for health and are really hugely influential in the anti-inflammatory diet.
I love the way you've described that, and it hadn't struck me quite so much until
Mhm.
you mentioned that there. And I know Paul Stamets has done extensive work on mushrooms and the mycelium that connects them underneath, and
Mm.
the profound properties, not only the biochemical and, as you said, the phytonutrients, but also other dimensions of these food groups, that they're not an animal, they're
Yeah,
not a plant.
yeah.
So, they're their own unique category. But this is certainly one of those things that really stands out in the anti inflammatory food pyramid. It has its place and is acknowledged to consume and weave in these Asian mushrooms so people can benefit from the health properties. And you can eat them fresh, but equally you can get powdered forms. And there's many different applications which we can mention briefly at the end.
Mhm. And like
My page too.
using the mushrooms in food and cooking is so tasty as well.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
so they're
I remember you messaging me after you made your first
miso mushrooms, isn't it?
mushroom. Yes, yeah, it was a stir fry, and you were delighted. And I think you got shiitake
Yeah,
mushrooms and stir fried them. Yeah, I
they're
remember.
so
I
good.
and
Yeah.
you were so delighted with it. Literally, elements of, say, the Asian food pyramid that we maybe are less familiar with would be soy protein features there. And a lot of people hear soy, and there was conflicting research about it in recent times. And some people certainly don't tolerate it so well.
Mhm.
But for people who do tolerate soy, it's a highly nutritious source of protein. But key factor is how it is produced and how it's been manufactured and sourced, like anything, like any
Mhm.
food. So this is one thing, I guess, this is what we're seeing with the rise of plant-based foods and meat alternatives, that actually a lot of them are highly, highly processed. And just because it's plant-based doesn't mean it isn't full of, all these additives.
Additives.
And yeah,
It doesn't necessarily mean that it's healthy. And I
exactly.
think we do often think that, or
Yeah.
that's the way it's marketed to us.
Certainly. And the same as with soy. And I remember being in a Kitchen at Hand's monastery back in 2015, and the nuns used to make their own tofu.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was fresh. Like, it was just amazing. So I guess just saying to listeners that there's a lot of factors to take into account when you're considering a food group.
And sourcing it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and the quality of how it's produced. So high quality soy-based products, tofu, tempeh can be really rich, valuable forms of protein.
Yeah.
If mushrooms and soy isn't getting anyone too excited, there's also other elements of the anti-inflammatory diet that maybe people are more excited about, such as dark chocolate
Woohoo.
and red wine.
Yeah. The dark chocolate, they usually say kind of 70% plus for the health benefits. And also, like, I think if it's less than that, it's really hard to not eat too much of it.
Absolutely.
If you want to keep it to like maybe a square or two in the evening. Um, but it is quite satisfying if you're in that space in the evening where you want something nice and you're like, oh, trying to be healthy or good, or what we term as good. But the dark chocolate actually has health benefits, believe it or not. It's a really good source of magnesium, and magnesium is linked with, it's really important for our muscle function, even the muscle in our heart. And it's also great for helping people who are struggling to sleep.
Amazing.
So it does have its benefits and
Yeah.
its place, and you can enjoy it too.
A little bit of dark chocolate, and then also a small amount of red wine has been shown to have cardiovascular benefits.
Yeah. The tannins in red wine have been shown to have cardiovascular benefits, as you said. It is in moderation.
Absolutely.
This is where it's quite similar to the Mediterranean diet, actually, because if you think about like the south of Italy, they have their red wine and their, their fish and their olive oil and all that. But the red wine, like one
Glass.
glass a
Yeah.
day, yeah,
And not even every day,
not
I
every
think.
day. Yeah.
And I think it also resveratrol in the red grape, again, another potent phytonutrient
For
that
the anti-inflammatory
have the
effect.
anti-inflammatory effect,
Yeah.
absolutely, and has been attributed to what was once called the French paradox. Did you ever hear about that? I
No.
think it ties in with the dark chocolate and the
Okay.
wine loving,
Yeah,
and yet
of
having
course.
these health properties and helping people to maintain optimal weight.
Hmm.
So, other key parts you mentioned olive oil. And I think this is an area, again, that kind of causes people confusion, and people can tend to be fearful around fats, especially if they're focused on weight loss.
Yeah.
Many people are very well aware of the idea of like good fats versus bad fats that we hear thrown around. But it is, of course, like all things, more complicated than that, unfortunately. But what we are aware of is the importance of weaving more of these healthy fats into our diet. And this can be a little bit daunting for people, especially if they're focused on weight loss and they're fearful around consuming excessive calories. So, some guidelines from the anti inflammatory diet, again, overarching principle, but to consume about 5 to 7 portions of oils throughout the day. And to give you an example of what a portion would be, like 2 walnuts would be a portion, a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil would be a portion, perhaps as part of your dressing on your salad. So some people might hear 5 to 7 portions and just be like, oh my goodness. And this is one again of those areas where this does differ from, say, for example, in Ireland, the National Healthy Eating Guidelines don't feature oils so heavily. So for people who maybe are a bit curious to learn more about this, and especially those who maybe have health concerns as well.
Yeah, like don't be afraid of olive oil when you're shopping for olive oil. Make sure it's the extra virgin olive oil. That is important. But olive oil is it's a great source of omegas, and we know that omega is very important in cardiac function, our mental cognitive function, and also plays a huge role in our cholesterol levels. So we need fats in our diet too. And it's all about finding a balance and keeping that ratio there. So, like, fat free diet is actually not recommended at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And we find that sometimes certain food groups get almost demonized, especially certain carbohydrates. But like everything can have its place and have its time.
Yeah.
But certainly the evidence is suggesting, especially for health and longevity, that it is important for us to consume these healthy fats and weave them into our diets.
Zevo is a fully integrated workplace wellbeing provider. We understand that every company has different goals, needs, and characteristics. Our team of psychologists, performance nutritionists, and experts in the field of physical health conduct in-depth research and thereafter develop and tailor strategic corporate wellbeing programs based on the outcome for each organisation. Our health and wellbeing technology helps take the pulse of your employees' wellbeing needs and promote positive engagement in your organisation's wellbeing programs, encouraging them to move, nourish and inspire. Our broad range of services, available both online and on site, are designed to improve employees' overall well-being and increase engagement within the workplace. We aim to create the healthiest workplace across the globe to ensure that your most important asset, your employees, are energised and thriving. Contact us today to start your workplace wellbeing journey. www.zevohealth.com.
So another great natural source of our healthy fats is oily fish, and there is again a rule of thumb principle, and these are of course as well featured in the National Healthy Eating Guidelines, is 1 to 2 portions of oily fish a week. So there's a simple acronym that can be useful to reference
Love a
when
good
you're
acronym.
and I'll smash. So our salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. So again, we're lucky again in Europe that we've tighter regulation around food production. In America, I think it is more of an issue to really be aware of where you're sourcing your oily fish.
Yeah.
Because if you imagine contaminants such as mercury, as we're aware, and various toxins can be dense in some oily fish.
Yeah,
So
we are lucky in Europe.
yeah,
Yeah.
very lucky. So just being aware again, I know we're hammering that point home with the olive oil and the soy, but the same applies. Just being aware of where you're sourcing these foods and not just assuming because something should be healthy that it is.
Yeah, and if you're kind of listening, thinking I really, really don't like fish, it's okay. You can get omega supplements in any pharmacy. My tip for buying any omega supplement, it's the omega 3 we're focusing on. Um, you would want to be looking at something that's about 1,000 milligrams, and have a look on the box, the amount of EPA versus DHA. You ideally want more EPA than DHA, and they're part of your omega 3s. So yeah, there are lots of options for that. More EPA is a very good brand. I'm not sponsored.
Yeah, no, I remember doing my master's
Yeah.
and a doctorate student came in to talk to us, and she had been researching EPA for years and it had cured her arthritis.
Yeah.
And yeah, she wasn't in any way
Brand
a brand
ambassador.
ambassador, no, not at all. And so I definitely know that. But just for anyone who maybe is vegan,
Yeah.
algae-based supplements is
Yeah.
another alternative.
Yeah, more EPA actually do have a vegetarian and vegan option as well, because I know even with gelatin and capsules, a lot of the omega fish oils would be capsule based because they
Absolutely.
enclose the oil.
Yes. And just so we're definitely not brand
Yeah.
ambassadors, there's also Eskimo oil and
Yeah, which they have a children's range as well.
oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
And is there Farm?
Farmanord is another really good brand as well.
Yeah.
You know, some of them can seem very expensive. To be honest, there are loads of brands of it. Just keep an eye on the
EPA,
milligrams and the EPA versus
DHA.
DHA. You want more EPA and look for around 1,000 milligrams on the box.
Excellent.
All right.
Thank you so much. So to learn more about any of the elements we've talked about, there's a lot of open source, free, accessible information online about the anti-inflammatory diet. Dr. Andrew Weil on his website goes into much greater depth about the different food groups and how to begin to weave them in.
Yeah, you'll find the food pyramid on his website as well. And that's Weil, it's spelled Weil,
Yeah.
Andrew Weil.
And we're probably not pronouncing it
I
correctly.
never know how to pronounce it. Is it wheel or
Yeah,
Weil?
we were one of the few Irish people on our
Yeah.
course at the time,
Yeah.
and all the Americans. Weil was the
Weil?
doctor.
Wheel? We must ask him.
Yeah. But you can check that out there. So just let's talk maybe a little bit about how to begin weaving some of these healthy eating principles into our daily lives, because I think this is a barrier a lot of people are confronted by, where we can have the best of intentions, especially on a Monday or
Yes.
Tuesday, and then the momentum of busy lives kicks in.
Mhm.
And when we're tired or overwhelmed, it's so much easier to go for fast, quick, and usually where we're going to get the greatest instant gratification in the form of sugar or fast foods.
And over-processed
Overprocessed
foods,
foods.
which basically take out the goodness of the food.
Absolutely. It's again that proverbial poker on the fire, a lot of those
Yeah, when it
hostages.
comes to like inflammation in the body, those over-processed foods fan the flames
Yeah.
and have a huge role in inflammation.
And you shared something really interesting with me before we went live, and that was about the prevalence of people consuming PPIs, so antacids. So could we just talk? I know we've spoken a bit about like what to eat on the anti-inflammatory diet, but if you'd like to share a little bit about like how people are eating.
Yeah, that's it. It's the how, and huge so many prescriptions that we see every day, multiple prescriptions people are on long-term PPIs, which are proton pump inhibitors. So you might have heard of Nexium, esomeprazole, Losec. They basically stop the overproduction of acid in the stomach. And, for people that are suffering from heartburn, indigestion, like there are other reasons people can be on them. Sometimes it's to protect your stomach from other medication as well. They do have their place and their role, but long-term use of PPIs can have a negative impact. And unfortunately, heartburn and that indigestion is often caused from our lifestyle. So, like, it wasn't really prevalent or around 50, 60 years ago. It's a very new disease, like this esophageal reflux. Yes, so how we eat really influences how our body can digest the food we are taking in. A lot of people I see with customers, they're maybe stressed with work. A lot of people eating on the go, which I was guilty of myself. As a pharmacist, you don't always get a break for lunch. You can be eating standing up. You can be eating, while you're running around doing other tasks. And unfortunately, that can lead to this indigestion, stomach pains, like bloating,
Tension.
tension.
And
Oh,
you're not the only healthcare workers or sectors that will be struck by this in
yeah.
recent years as well.
Yeah. So it's like, what can we do then? Just to be aware of when we're eating. Like, are we sitting down at a table, looking at the food we're eating, noticing what we're eating, and chewing our food? A lot of us just inhale our food. We sit down with our
Times
dinner, you're like watching Netflix or TV, you're mindlessly eating. You're not really paying attention to what you're eating. And that's when we miss our body's signals to say you've had enough or you're full. Like we miss these innate natural signals that, yeah, we're just losing that.
And so the long-term effect of taking these antacids and PPIs, it can also have a negative effect on our absorption of minerals and vitamins. And
Yeah, there's
yeah,
been lots of links, studies showing links to osteoporosis. If you think about it, it makes sense because if you're kind of messing with the body's natural amount of acid in the stomach, we need acid in our stomach to break down the food we eat. We need to break down the food we eat so that our body can absorb the nutrients it needs. But if we're kind of altering this natural process,
long-term,
yeah, long term,
yeah,
um, it will
it
affect
can.
the nutrients that are being absorbed, which then in turn it's like a domino effect. It can knock on that, it can affect your bone health and all sorts of other
In
issues
the longer term.
in the long
What
term.
I absolutely love talking to you about is like that real appreciation for everything having its place. And so this is not in any way to say that antacids don't serve their
Of
purpose and are
course.
required at times, but it's
Yeah.
definitely acknowledging that when we start defaulting to something as a long-term fix for
Yeah.
something that maybe it's only intended for
Like
temporary.
we really should be looking at why am I having this heartburn, and like what is the root cause? And if you can get the awareness of what's causing the issue in the first place, then you kind of have much more chance of finding a solution. So if it is stress, like what can you do? Could we do some breathing exercises? Could I make sure I sit down for my dinner at a table,
Yeah.
not just grab a sandwich on the go or eating in the car. Like it's actually make time and space for that.
So it's putting these buffers in place and not only considering what we're eating as
Hmm.
having an anti-inflammatory effect, but how we're
How we're
eating,
eating.
where we're eating,
Yeah,
why we're eating.
yeah, and yeah, to enjoy the food, like appreciate it, like like eating dinner times. It should be like a ritual,
Social
Just
connection. You
yeah,
lit up earlier when you said food should be enjoyed. It's
yeah.
delicious. Talk just briefly a little bit about the anti-inflammatory diet and weight loss. And I know we were out for a little walk in the forest before we came in here to record, and you mentioned quite a concerning trend that you've noticed in the pharmacy recently.
Yeah, you may be aware of it. There is a new injection for weight loss that it's huge in America and it has come to Ireland now and it's extremely popular, which I find quite sad because, as we said earlier, food should be enjoyed. Um, but a lot of people are really struggling with weight loss and
Feeling maybe desperate or
desperate and looking towards medicine, something to almost, it's not a quick fix, but the way I look at the weight loss injection is that if you're the wrong side of that mountain peak and you're climbing up, you need something to help lift you over that peak and onto the right side of the slope. This is a good option for some people, but only in conjunction with lifestyle changes, dietary changes, more movement and exercise in lifestyle.
And the deeper emotional
Emotional,
and psychological work as
yeah, like
well.
the injection aims to decrease or suppress your appetite. But as we all know, when we binge on something that maybe we know is not healthy for us, it's usually not because we're hungry.
The
So,
term emotional eating
emotional eating,
is out there.
absolutely.
So, again, what you're saying is you can see how it could be useful in certain contexts. But what you've noticed is there's a lot of people coming in for it that
Yeah.
haven't done any sort of inquiry or exploration around diet or making changes to
Yeah. And there
movement.
is this movement towards that weight loss injection. It's been widely celebrated for a lot of people, but as I said, it needs to be done in conjunction with healthy nutrition, a healthy diet, educate yourself.
On the psychological, emotional
Yeah.
support and the kind of deeper inquiry. I
Deeper
know,
inquiry, even therapy, like, not to be afraid to speak to somebody, like it goes so deep.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
if you look at, like, it's this integrative approach, this holistic approach to the body, the mind body connection, and to not just think of it as weight loss, but like health journey.
I love that.
Yeah.
That and there's no end, there's no like static end point of perfect
No.
health that anyone reaches. It's
Yeah.
dynamic and changeable. And when we look at our environments and even social context over the last number of years, we're confronted by so much volatility and change constantly. So our body's requirements also are incredibly dynamic. So
Yeah.
so we're never going to land on that this is the right way, or
I'm
the absolute,
perfect.
or even the absolute right way to eat it, because everything's always
Yeah, and you need to
changing.
listen to your body as well and what your needs are. After the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in prescriptions for antidepressants and also for people being diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which is concerning. And it reflects on, where our society might be at. Highlights the importance of human connection. With the pandemic, with lockdowns, like people did get isolated, and that negatively impacted some people's health.
And compounded these underlying
Yeah.
imbalances. So what I love about what you mentioned earlier about the social connection and the food, how really like eating and enjoying delicious food, weaving in more of these anti-inflammatory foods,
Yeah.
doesn't have to be absolute, doesn't have to feel like you're self-sacrificing,
Yeah.
but ways that you can amalgamate all these different threads.
Yeah.
That
So maybe invite someone over, to try a new recipe.
stir fried
Yeah.
shiitake mushrooms,
Throw a bit of
literally.
turmeric in there for the anti-inflammatory spice.
No garlic if you want some kissing. If we start with breakfast,
Mhm.
so one example I would see with smoothies, for example, a lot of people are familiar with smoothies these days. They're quick and easy. However, a lot of people tend to make them very high in fruit content and maybe with yogurt or dairy as a base. So, some simple ways to make it healthier and more anti inflammatory would be to add a high quality fat and protein and maybe even some superfoods. So, an example of that would be adding in a spoon of nut butter, half an avocado, adding in maybe even some kale. And we spoke about Asian mushrooms earlier, a little half teaspoon of Asian mushroom powder, which you can get. And of course, it won't be the same as the whole food, but nonetheless, will still have very healthful properties.
Yeah, you're getting loads of phytonutrients from
Loads of
that, and
phytonutrients.
yeah, it's gonna start your day off well.
It will with a little kick, and of course, raw cacao, and if you can get a little bit of the raw chocolate powder in there, that's absolutely fabulous as
Yeah,
well.
like it should be enjoyed and
Exactly.
fun. Experiment with
I
it.
love, yeah,
Yeah.
making it delicious and different all the time. I have a friend, Frederick from Sweden, and he's just a master in the kitchen. He never makes the same meal twice. He's
Oh wow.
always experimenting, and so it's very inspiring. So other things like our juices can be a quick, easy way for people that can be time consuming. Porridge, really adding on elements to porridge. Do you
Yeah.
have any favorites?
Pimp your porridge.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love my porridge, and I love trying new things. Like last week, I added a bit of cinnamon and turmeric powder to my
You'd
porridge.
never think of turmeric
I
in
was a bit
porridge.
nervous and it was turning yellow, so I was quite nervous, but I had a bit of peanut butter in there as well,
Oh,
and
lovely.
I can't remember what fruit, apples, maybe blueberries.
I love it.
It was
Did you
delicious.
brush your teeth after?
Yes, my mum was a dentist, so did not want to go to work with yellow teeth.
You'd make it teeth. That's the downfall of turmeric.
It stains
And then
everything.
flax seeds. If you're adding
Mm.
flax seeds to your porridge, just making sure you mill them so that you can get those omegas. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's
another
more
really good
accessible.
source.
Yeah. And then for lunches, I find, and this was an absolute win for me a few years ago when I started making soup on a Sunday, and I thought
Mm.
making homemade soup was a big deal in terms of time and energy. But once you do it once or twice and get into the rhythm, you'll have a meal for 3 or 4 days,
Yeah.
obviously depending how many are in the household.
Yeah.
And delicious, again, delicious combinations,
Yeah.
delicious fresh vegetable, tomato. You can make Asian mushroom soups.
Yeah.
There's a whole host. So that's a great lunch, quick, versatile, easy lunch option.
And if you're like me and a little bit sometimes nervous in the kitchen or not sure of my cooking skills, I got a soup maker
Yeah.
thing.
And tell me, what's the difference?
It looks like a kettle, and you literally throw everything in, fill the water up to the line, throw in your stock cube, and press the button on top and walk away.
Oh,
And when you
amazing.
come back, you have soup.
So there you go.
So great.
Here's Great. Amazing. And then salads, of course, I think we can be a bit default again to sameness in the salad
Yeah.
department for a lot of people, especially in Ireland. We can go for our iceberg lettuce, tomato, cucumber combo, but really branching.
Yeah, the customers also, when you mention salad, and they're like, they think you're going to be telling them to eat rabbit food like carrot sticks and lettuce. Like, salads can be so delicious. Like, you just need to make them colorful, different textures, so different crunches.
Yeah,
Throwing some nuts in there changes it.
so delicious.
Yeah.
And I love that you added colour there because that was a piece we didn't mention earlier with the anti-inflammatory diet, phytonutrients. A key part of it is varying the fruits and veg you eat because certain phytonutrients are more dense in certain coloured fruit and veg.
Yeah.
And if you vary the colour, or what many people would have heard, eating a rainbow, it's actually rooted in hard science because you'll get a greater, let's say, spectrum of these phytonutrients and they have a synergistic effect when we consume them. And it's really, again, much more effective and supportive of that homeostasis. So there's actually a challenge. Some people may have heard of it called the 30 plant challenge.
Oh, yeah.
And so instead of eating your 5 a day and just focus on 5 a day, if you then have an inclination towards being samey, like myself,
Yeah.
and you eat the same veggies, the 30 plant challenge really challenges you to explore different fruits and veg, different herbs and spices, and get a bit more adventurous. So that might be something for people to check
To
out.
try, yeah, go into Aldi or Lidl. They're great to have. Like sometimes I don't even know what the vegetable is, but I'm like, let's try that and see what happens.
Something totally new. I introduced my little cousin to passion fruit this morning. She'd never seen it before. I was like, oh, it sounds lovely.
Ah.
Seeing her eat it for the first time and her little nose squinching, it was all better.
Ah.
But it was lovely. When it comes to dinners, I mean, like we could have a series, never mind the next 2 minutes to talk about it. But things like you instantly lit up when you mentioned like stir fries are
Yeah.
such a quick and easy and great way, versatile way to get lots of anti-inflammatory foods. And just generally some plant-based recipes.
Yeah, to explore more plant-based recipes and kind of get away from that traditional, like especially in Ireland, it's like a meat, potato, and veg. And that's like the way a lot of us would have grown up. That was always your staple dinner. But you don't have to have meat in every meal. And I'm not saying you have to be vegetarian or anything, but um, don't be opposed to a recipe that does just because it doesn't contain meat. Like just be open to trying new recipes.
And I do think, as you say, that a lot of people are already moving that
Yeah.
direction, eating for their own nutritional requirements, because it helps them feel better, but also eating because of the environmental impact and making choices based on what their food selection, the knock-on effect it has on their communities and the environment.
And the climate,
The
yeah.
climate.
But also, another thing we didn't mention was like pulses, beans, lentils. Those types of food are so full of protein, but they're actually quite cheap. So from a financial point of view, I'm often just cooking for myself, and it's actually much cheaper to eat a plant-based meal than buying meat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So some people might tend to feel eating healthier costs a lot more.
Mhm.
And in certain ways it can,
Yeah.
but there are also many ways to save a lot of
A
money
lot, yeah.
by with well informed choices when
Yeah.
it comes to
And
eating.
again, a lot of the recipes, the plant-based recipes, your meals will be colorful, and there is definitely a link with it making you feel better mentally as well. When you look at your meal and you see, as you said earlier, a rainbow of colors, like it does make you feel better. Do you know, Prozac capsules used to be like blue and almost glittery. Like you would look at it and instantly feel better just because it was so pretty.
So there was research gone into the design of these pills and the effect it has just
Like
consuming
it
something
was an
beautiful.
antidepressant tablet to make you feel better, and then you pop it out and it's like blue and sparkly. It's not like that anymore, but it used to be like
Okay,
that.
so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess there is a whole industry based on, making food look beautiful
Yeah.
and a haute cuisine.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's so interesting. So look, there's lots of simple tips there. I know it's very light touch in the short time we have together today. But for people to explore this more, there's so much open source, free, accessible content online.
Yeah.
So just exploring anti-inflammatory recipes.
Yeah.
There's cookbooks out there with different authors. And of course, as we mentioned earlier, Dr. Andrew Wiles' webpage
Yeah.
on the anti-inflammatory diet.
He also has a podcast series called Body of Wonder. It wouldn't be as good as our podcast, but I'm only joking. But you could have a look at that too. It's available on Spotify.
That is an amazing podcast. It's
Yeah.
actually one of my favorite. I haven't listened in a couple of months, but I was, a regular listener. Like,
Yeah.
fascinating topic.
Yes. I'm known in work as like being the H2O sheriff. So we haven't mentioned anything about water consumption. So just before we leave, I feel like I have to say it, just to make sure you are drinking plenty of water every day, because from a health point of view, dehydration causes a lot of
Disruption.
headaches, lack of concentration, low energy. You know, it's a we're very lucky to have access to clean water in Ireland. So, make use of it and
Yeah.
appreciate it and drink it.
Liz, it's been just such a joy to chat to you today. Thank you so much for your time. And very much hope that the listeners have benefited from the conversation. And there's so much resources on the Zibo Health website that if people want to look into other trainings, other content that we have around these healthy eating protocols, there's plenty there to dive into. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.